Kaya yung sa tini to hakakewa ya haani kakaya yat ak kwan hasta ani aya siu dak nastan aya yidat khoach ya hit kak away siu daku satan to hakakewa akoa chak Yéil na shak aya aye wutin ya as yekt wujakak ausatin we diga tin awa we Ktoo has ausadik shak het khwasa kuwa naksawi qonekhe u ikqa aqeidai wu gwalli ka qe an qwakoots aqa away we qia ya tlaqtawe gwalla tu ye wutin hu away ya watlaq ya taqa Yéil qatillu ata gulchish itqa qatu yeti adata yuqaqtu tlaat. Good morning, everybody. We like to say Tsuhakakewa'a, which is the daylight broke on us again, which maybe I will put on a little document so that we can see it. And I have too many things open on my computer. Why did I do that? Okay. But just so we can see it, and I will also drop it in the chat. Gotta make this big. Oops, not 1,000. That's gigantic. And if any of you folks work in teaching languages, you always got to get your thing to stop checking the spelling. You see, you don't know Tlingit, and you also have to, if you could turn off autocorrect and stuff when you're typing in Tlingit, that's always a good idea because you might end up accidentally sending someone some bilingual gibberish, which, you know. And I don't know, those red lines, they're helpful when I'm typing because I'm a I don't type carefully, so I tend to mix my letters up a lot, just the timing of my fingers, I think. Anyways, this term, we'll go through it maybe in little pieces. And it's a way to say good morning. We learned it when we were in a language camp at Yakutat from Kalneek, Florence Shakely. There is nothing wrong with saying good morning, which is a pretty straight translation. So this first word, so this part is yake, which is the verb to say it is good or they are good. But when you put this little suffix on here, ye, yake, then you're saying good noun. So it kind of turns the verb into an adjective. So there is a little suffix that goes on there. There are some rules to how suffixes go. It's usually an I, but if the word ends with a vowel, like EI is a vowel, then it will be YI. But if the word is rounded, which means it ends with a W, then it will be a U or a WU. So if you got OO, it'll be WU. And there's a whole lesson on that we do that in intermediate Tlingit. And we could do that sometime here if you folks are into like smashing out some Tlingit rules. But we've got them all documented. We teach them. It is predictable. There's a whole set of them, but once you start sort of figuring out, there's a bunch of times I think learning Tlingit, when you look at the rules of how it works and the grammar, it gets sometimes it gets confusing for your English brain to start thinking about a whole other language and how it does things. But then once you start saying it and using it, you'll see it makes sense. It's just another way to do it through different sound systems and structures. And then we have tutat, which is morning. So one way to say good morning, I'll say it and you all repeat, is Yek'ei tutat.
Yitutat.
Yek'ei tutat.
Yeah.
Hey.
Tat.
Yak utat.
Eit. Sutat.
And so that's in the chat in case anybody wants to have it. So this, when you go to this y part, it kind of just runs right into the next part. So if you're just really sort of speaking, um, then there's not too, yak utat. They just kind of run into each other. So the next one down is another way to say. It's a greeting that maybe was a little more common. I do believe, I don't know if people said this, you could say, either you put afternoon, day, whatever. I don't think we're going to do it. But let's go down to this one. So this word as a low, if it has a low tone, there's two versions of s. So there's a low tone version, which means again, and then you usually have a verb. So it typically comes before the verb, and it means to do the verb again. So that's why you say tsuye klasatin. I will see you again, right? So the again part is right in there. And then there is a high tone one, which usually comes after a phrase or a noun, and then you'd have, so I'm actually going to put this on the other side. And then this one means also. So then you'd say, wa'etsu, right? You too, or I might say, people might say, achit yanuaha, achit yanuaha. I'm hungry, I'm hungry. Chatsu, chatsu achit yanuaha. Me too. So the high tone one is also, the low tone one is again. Just sort of like trying to keep them straight because they sound almost identical. So this one is the again. These two go together. So ha, ka. This in English would be called a preposition. So in, on, around, above, below, all of those things to say like where something is in relation to something else. In Tlingit we call them postpositions because they come after the noun. So for example, you'd say table on, me around, or you'd say my around. And you'd say dog under, or whatever, right? So the ha part, so that's one thing that's different than English is that it comes after. So just as you start to sort of learn some of these things, like to say about it, you'd say da. About a cat, douche da. The other thing that's different is you use kind of, it sounds like an object pronoun to me in English. So you'd say around me, told me. So those are using the same me. In Tlingit, you use a possessive pronoun. So this means our, like you say ha ani, ha shishkohas, ha yukatangi. So our thing. So it goes our on, and that's how you say on us. So just a couple of things, like as you start to learn more about Tlingit, I recommend just saying, sometimes saying, oh, it's a reverse order, instead of saying the word backwards, because backwards is sometimes used in a negative way. Like there was someone decades ago, when they were pushing for the Alaska to become basically an English-only state by saying English is the official language of Alaska. One of the people who was leading that movement was giving an interview, and they said, well, if Alaska Natives want to go backwards and use their own languages, they can just stay in the villages. So I don't like to say any language is backwards. I just like to say, oh, it's a different word order, it's reversed, because I do think some of these words can have these other strange meanings, like something's supposed to be a certain way. So again, on us, or if you want to do straight Tlingit, right? Again, our, on. Kewa'a is a verb for the dawn, the day to break, for the dawn to occur. And this verb, like this phrase, I think it does have a relationship to a raven story. And we're going to listen to a raven story. But but there was a time Raven was down at the head of the Nos River, and he was sitting in a tree, and he was watching these. They called them fishers of the night, and they were fishing with dip nets, but they were fishing for driftwood. I never understood why they're fishing for driftwood. I just listened to the story. I'm like, all right, okay. And then he starts to yell at them. Akheit I woo. This is a good phrase to know. We're kind of going all over the place just because. So Akheit I woo is a command. And, oops, let me back up. Gotta put things in the chat. Okay. And I will put these notes up. After class, I like to put a recording of our class up, and then if I take notes, I make a PDF of that and I put it up so people can have it. Akheit Aiwu is a command. Has anybody heard that before? I'm just curious. So it's saying, send me something to eat. And it's kind of a really indirect way to say it, because you're really saying, oh, I will put the recordings up as well. And I could put links up to, there's lots of recordings, but I will put links up to the recordings. Although this particular one, hold on. If you go to klinkitlanguage.com, resources, there's a tab that pops up, or a whole bunch of options, and one of those options is Raven Book. You can find this audio there. So you're literally saying, send it to my mouth, like by mail or something. Like this is the verb to send something, usually by mail, or, I guess you could send it like, bring this up to so-and-so. So it's a really, but Raven does, we were doing this in intermediate Tlingit last night, is really taking a deep dive onto some of the things that Raven says. And Raven is very, like, this is where you gotta study the grammar. So Raven, he'll probably still trick you if you encounter him, but at least you'll get the grammar, because he does really complicated stuff and saying things like, is there no way you can go and get that fire and bring it to me? And it's very complicated, though. It's like a bunch of double negatives and like super complicated potential verb forms and stuff. And he does this all the time. Anyway, so he starts yelling at the people, send me something to eat. Akheit I woo, akheit I woo. Then he does a really complicated one. So he says, Gwash yi ka ke an kwa kuz. Let's see if I got it right. Okay, Gwash yi ka ke an kwa kuz. Okay, I think it's that. I'm gonna check my spelling. So this phrase it's a doozy. But this is what he's saying. So he says, send me something to eat. Send me something to eat. I might break the daylight on you. And so this is, if you really get into learning Tlingit, you do get into some complicated, oh, here it is. Let me just fix my spelling. You get into some complicated phrasing. We don't have to get there yet, but we will at some point. There it is. Ke'an kwak'uts. So here's this ke'ah, which is both a verb and a noun. As a verb, this is for, you could say ke'wa'ah, and that means the sun has risen. It has broken the horizon. That's really what it's talking about. And you can also talk about that moment it first pokes up. We just see the top edge of the sun, which, you could see it here. You can see it in other places. But once it sort of breaks that horizon, it's called Kekhe, which is the mouth of the dawn. And then you get into this. So, Tsuhakakewa'a. So let's go. Let's do this in two little chunks. Tsuhaka.
Suhaka.
Tsuhaka.
Suhaka.
Kewa'a.
Hewa.
Kewa.
Kewa.
So you do have this back K. It's back
Ke-
the whole thing. Suhaka Kewa. Suhaka Kewa. Yeah, okay, gonna cheese. Any questions about those? Okay. So let me introduce this story a little bit as soon as I find where I put it. Okay. I really like this version of the story. Let me make this bigger for myself. It was told at a museum in Portland when they're looking at an item that was in the museum, which is about Raven losing his nose. So Yéil, Dusyeig. That means Raven, his nose, and de does not have gender. It's a genderless pronoun. But when we talk about Raven, I would say he, because the stories show that Raven is male. Ch is both nose and beak. So if you start speaking Tlingit a lot, don't be surprised if you start talking about bird noses. You'll just start saying. And then K is upwards. It pops up before some verbs to say there's some upward thing usually going on. And then Dusyeig is to drag it or pull it. And then de is a fourth person pronoun, which means someone does it. So Raven's nose is pulled up, is what that translates to, but we usually say Raven loses his nose because that's what happens in this story. It's very fun. I'll put this version up on our class page. Some of the things that I really like about this is you have two parallel versions that sort of take at times slightly different directions, which is really amazing. So the storyteller is Danawak Austin Hammond, but you're getting a live translation by Hoodzi Anna Katzig, who's the mother of Kingisti David Katzig. And what's really neat is when you study this story, you'll see sometimes she has her own spin on it because she knows this story as well. So she's not just translating everything he says, but sometimes she's and the way she does, I think, is masterful. So so what you'll see is we'll sort of start here, and you'll see in the larger text is what he says, and in the smaller text, I only make it smaller because I say, okay, English, you got to be little. Well, let us be big for a while, because you've been all over the place. Like I was down in British Columbia, and I saw these big signs for like places, and here's what you need to do, Southeast Alaska and Tlingit is you make a sign, and in really big letters you'd put Zantik Ihini, and then in little letters you'll put Gold Creek, because that name got taken from us. And so part of bringing that name back is sort of saying, yeah, there's this other name for it. If you want to slow way down, maybe pull over, you could read it, because it's been the other way for too long. So anyways, but this is, and you'll hear her, this is what she says. And then later you can go through and there's a second translation, and the live translation is beautiful and wonderful. I love it. It's like this braided thing, and if you speak Tlingit, you can enjoy both things. It's just sometimes it's got its own take on things, which is really interesting. And then below it is basically a more linear translation, where I sat down with Ktoo Nora Dowenhauer, and we just said, well, what is in the Tlingit here? And that's mostly for learners. And then at the end, I'll just sort of hover down towards the bottom of this version, and you'll hear some people clapping. And then I think someone's going to make a joke. And I'll tell you the joke because they're going to laugh. And you might say, why is it so funny? So Tlingit kinship is really interesting. It's very clan-based, and it's also based on your name. So like you can inherit, so I'm Khone. I met this wonderful elder. He was probably 80 years old, and his name was Charles DeWitt. And when he found out my Tlingit name, he started calling me uncle because his uncle was Ktoo. So I'm that Ktoo and every other Ktoo. So you inherit these kinship terms. So if your mother had a Tlingit name, like if your mother was named Jilkatit, and you met someone named Jilkatit, you would call them mother. And so it's really wild how this stuff works, because I had an elder too. We were very close. Her name is Shkate, Jessie Johnny, and she gave one of her names to my first child, and then she started calling me dad. Like, it was really, and and then even said, I never knew my dad growing up. I always wanted a dad. So it's really amazing how this stuff works. Anyways, there is a term, sunny. So usually it's a isani, which means your paternal uncle. You gotta be real careful with this stuff. You gotta learn when the right time is, because you're not supposed to publicly make fun of your opposites. Usually. There are like these little areas where you can sort of find these things that are pretty funny. And what an elder says, so you've got this one elder who's a storyteller, master speaker, amazing individual, Donawak Austin Hammond. He tells this story, and you have Hudzi Anakatsik, another cultural giant, and they get done telling this story, and then there's this pause, and then a quite elderly person, judging by the sound of their voice, says, Isani Shu Owa, that's your uncle's nose. And everybody busts out laughing. It's very funny in Tlingit. For some reason, there's these things where you can do light teasing about somebody's uncle. So just pay attention to that stuff. I think it's one of those cultural things that makes sense over time. So this recording is about 13 minutes, so we gotta go. And then I think they sing this song. I don't have the words for the song here, but I do believe they're in De Laguna's Under Mount St. Elias, which I can show you folks how to access if you're not sure how to access. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, das jeden Tag hat das Atschk.
Ravens does not swim in a water.
Yata, Atash Kalneek
And
Hotzati.
still we have the raven nose that we have a story behind it.
Oh, how are you?
He heard about it.
Where Thai Jai does the
Heard
Hoya.
about where a place where they threw fat at each other.
Just Thai, Kata Hayet.
The raven really liked fat.
No, you got those Honia.
But still, he never gained weight. He's always slim. He was always hungry.
Oh, I was sitting out and not say a chat Hayek.
And you saw the people jigging for halibut.
Ate, Yahin, Kayata, Yakshah.
And then he looked at the water, and it was just as if he lifted up like a blanket to look under.
Thai do good.
So he walked underneath the water.
Another Katnich, and the Hindu Katia. So another to saw Honchak. Word a Hanate,
He's talking about the old timer halibut hook. They used to tie it on, and he was examining the halibut hooks while he was down there.
That's a to look, and not a call case.
And the person who was holding it above that was fishing. Didn't even feel the jigging on the line when he untied it.
Okay, the second note,
When they pull up the line,
Tata, so knock.
there would be anything on there.
So then I got to
Then they
hinder.
would put another bait on. That's what he said. They used to tie it on, tie the bait on, and then they would throw the halibut hook over.
So yeah,
And he would do the same to it, the halibut hook. I mean, the
not
bait.
a cake.
He
So
would untie the baits off.
when I end this new say,
He did that so many times.
yeah, she can look forward. I got died or turn to cause
And the man that was fishing was wondering what's going on, who takes the bait off our hook.
So yeah, it's jail to cool a car.
And so they went for an expert who could feel a very slight tug on a line.
They are trying to go
They went ashore to find the person who was an expert at feeling things when there's a little jerk on the line.
so I thought I could so I do good.
And the raven went underneath again. He went under the water.
I did that again.
He thought he was just so clever, so he was taking it off as smoothly as he can do it, untie the bait. He said when he was taking the bait off, he had his nose too close to it, too close to the hook. That expert felt there's something going on this line, he felt a little wiggling. And then he pulled, you have to pull the line. They said that the halibut hook got right on his nose, on Raven's nose. And they were bringing him up. And he could see under the bottom of the boat, just like you see the ceiling. And as soon as he came closer, he kicked up underneath the boat, and the man was pulling it. Whoever Uncle Raven is, he says, "Forgive me for telling this story." He was kicking underneath, holding him, bracing himself under there so they won't pull him in. Finally, here was the raven nose on the hook. They pulled his nose off. They didn't know what it was. The fishermen did not know exactly what it was. When the fishermen went ashore, all the people came down and they were examining this thing they brought up. Poor Raven came ashore, came out from in the water without a nose. And he found a bark, and he sharpened it. Then he stuck it to where his bill usually goes, his nose. He said that he had on a hat with a bill on. They didn't know where he got this hat that had a bill, and he started to walk. And he went from one house that began not coming to the village. One house at a time, and then he asked, I wonder who got Ponate's nose. He gave it a name. He wasn't saying it's my nose, I wonder who pulled it up, he said. They said, we heard it was next door, so he went to the next door house. And then he would go to the next door and he said, is this where they caught someone brought up the Ponate's nose? They said, no, not here, try next door. He was walking through the houses. Finally, he came to the house where his nose was, and he was asking, "Are you the people who brought up the Kalneek's nose?" And they said, "Yes, we did. It's right there." They put down the downy part of a bird feathers around it. He was looking at it. He said, "My, this looks." He looked strange to him. He said, "Isn't this something?" It's amazing. While he was looking at it, while people looked at it, blinked their eye, he pulled the other one off. Then he put his nose back. Then he ran out the door. That's why when you see a raven, it doesn't look like it really fits onto his nose. That's the way the story went as it was told to him. How long was it? 20 minutes?
Yep, that was exactly
Yes,
7 minutes.
yes.
It's just one of the cute little things he did. We all knew it when they brought it out, you know, what that. It's a neat story. Yeah, people think it's just a raven beak, you know, but there's a story behind it.
Wait, it's suddenly Ktoo over.
That's your uncle. Your uncle Raven's nose.
Your father. Where did he go?
It's just a song on
Why don't you sing the song?
Catherine Mills just mentioned that there is a song that goes with this raven nose. Catherine Mills, I think they know the song. Amy is an old timer Dakani for the Ravens, and she knows different songs, and she is very good in singing. She's one of our best, including Lydia is one of the best on the Raven side. So here they are. They're going to sing about the raven nose. That's Katoayati with.
Sheesh. So there's a number of things I think about. One is like how much fun these stories were at times. Like there's a lot of laughter. If you really get into the story, there's a lot of funny things going on, just the way that they say things, the words they choose. Even when he's sort of towards the end, he says, "Kall awul jaqhi tina deiti." The way the way that it's there, it doesn't fit. And they're talking about the nose of a raven, like how you can see sometimes like it looks like someone did kind of jam it onto the bird, like the bird itself. And then he repeats, and then he says in English, which is fun because he uses the word fit from English. And he just said the same thing in Tlingit, but you do a lot of wordplay, you do a lot of, and then when he breaks out and he says, whoever's Raven's auntie, please forgive me, and stuff like it. There's like little things that are just really funny in Tlingit. There are some Raven stories that are on the more serious side, and some of them are kind of just like really kind of wild in terms of what he does. But then some of them are just really funny. But then the other thing is that, and so like in terms of how people are listening to this, like sometimes when we start telling a Raven story these days, everyone gets super serious, and it's a it's usually a really fun time. And then the other thing is just realizing there was quite often a story, a hat, and a song, right? Or several pieces of atu that all refer back to the same story, like Gishtach Wugudi Yéil. There's shirts and there's all kinds of stuff that are button blankets that are made with that image where Raven goes down among the bull kelp. So just wanted to point that out and to share it. And yeah, and it's fun. And you're kind of laughing, but you're also real careful how you talk about Raven as well. So it's very fun. Any thoughts or questions before we go back to emotions and practicing those? Okay. So we had gone through, I think, 2 pages. I'll go through them kind of quickly to recap. We have Ktoo Sigu, Ktoo Yak Chat Yak Ktoo Atwutakin, Ktoo Sitzin, Ktoo Wuduwaka, Ktoo Kaudig Yas. I think we might have left off here. Well, we got to page 1. Okay. So I think we left off here. We're doing lots of talking about how these work. So a lot of this we see Ktoo, my thoughts, feelings, intentions, spirit, desires. It has so many different meanings, but the part is my. It's on the same category as ha. Gukayi, my cup. If this was ours, ha gukayi, our cup. Ani, my land. Ha ani, our land, right? So then the tu part is that feelings or spirit. So just pay attention to when we're using tu, right? I feel happy, I feel good, I feel brave, I feel at peace. Wudu ga is the phrase for when you got a slack tide. So, my spirit is a slack tide. It's a pretty direct kind of metaphor. And so is the next one. So I guess let's just say this. Everybody say, ach tu,
To
Ktoo.
ach tu.
to
And just remember that it's ach, right? So my. Ach is my. And then this last part, would do waga.
would do a ga
Would do waga.
would do a ga.
So I will point out this du is in there. And it is usually a 4th person pronoun. So we usually translate that as happened or people did it. But some verbs just have that just kind of randomly frozen in there, and this is one of them. Nobody slacked the tide. It's just built in there. Ach tu wu wu du wa ga.
Would do a ga.
Ktoo wuduwaka.
Ktoo wuduwaka.
And this verb means to like spread out a blanket or something, to like smooth it out and to spread it out, maybe to get the wrinkles out a little bit. And that's feeling relaxed. So it's like my spirit has been, it's like a blanket that's been spread out. Ktoo kaudayas.
Ktoo kawadayas.
Let's look at this part just on a song. Kaudayas.
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 Ktoo kaudayas.
Ktoo kaudayas.
So this one I put 2 in here. This is something that we were told a lot while we were learning Tlingit, and I'm very grateful for that. Because people used to really go on about how difficult the language is, and I'm like, okay, well, what if we just said people were intelligent and just gave them a whole bunch of confidence to keep learning Tlingit? So King Gacy, he used to say this to kids all the time. He used to say it to us all the time. And so we're going to say this, and then we're going to say this one, but we're also going to say, don't stand up in front of people and say this one. Yeah, because, you sound like you're bragging about yourself. And we're always careful, because if we brag about ourselves, then something bad is going to happen. But if you need to give yourself like you're trying to pump yourself up and you're kind of by yourself maybe, and then you can certainly say this to yourself. Or in maybe if you had to defend yourself or something. You're in some Tlingit Twitter battle with some fool. Names. Hey, okay, we're not going to worry about that right now. So we see that this is the me and this is the you. What's interesting about this, though, is it uses a subject pronoun, and the subject is usually the one who does it. So it's sort of like saying, I do intelligence. I don't know. It's just really interesting to me. But how you say it is yaqidzige.
Itsuke.
Ya
Yeah.
yaqidzige.
Yakige.
Yaqidzige.
Yakizuke.
Yaqidzige.
Yakizuke.
And then I am intelligent. Yaquchdzige.
Yakutsuke.
Yaquchdzige.
Yakutsuke.
Okay. You are. Yaquchdzige chodnach. Then, let's see. There is a question in the chat. So, we're going to jump ahead a little bit. I think we come up to this one in this presentation. But tuwukliqe is I am proud. Tuwukliqe. So, kashiqe means for something to be bright or beautiful, sparkly, nice, like this bright, shiny, beautiful thing. So you're really saying my thoughts or spirit is beautiful. Again, like that's not the best thing to say on its own. I am, I am proud. It just sounds like if we said that, like if we're talking about someone like they're too proud. We're really saying like they think too highly of themselves. But if you add ikach to the end, now it's such a nice thing. I'm proud of you. That's the important part. So very similar to haka, like when we started today, hakakewa'a. A very similar one is kach. So you could say ikach hastu kach ach tuwukleche. I am proud of them. Ikach ach tuwukleche. I'm proud of you. And the ikach could go on either side. Good question. Yeah, ikach gunashishach tu yeyeti. I am thankful for you. Yeah. Okay. I have confidence in myself. It really means I believe. I believe inside my own self. So again, some of these are in here there's like good phrases here to just kind of pump yourself up. Because sometimes you need that. You might be feeling sad. You might be going through something. You might be struggling. Your English brain might be trying to trick you, English brain trying to be Raven now, saying it's too hard. Let's just do English. We already know English. Let's just go watch TV and do English all the time. It'd be so fun. But then you might have to say, "Kijk, stuk achterin," and talk to your own brain if you have to. So this is a pronoun the same kind as this one. So ach is my, ha is our. This sh, which can also be chush, means to the self. So to say I believe in you, you'd say ik achahin. So that would be, I'll put it in here just so we have it. Ik achahin. And that's saying I believe in you or I believe you. It just depends on the context, right? Like you and I were sitting here, and I've got a yummy little cinnamon roll, and I come back and it's gone. I say, "Wasa atbune? What happened?" And if you said, "Kechwacha," I didn't eat it. I might say, "Ik achehin," I believe you. So in that context, it's saying I believe, and you could adjust this a little bit. Iyuk tangit achehin, I believe your words. But ik achehin could also mean I have faith in you and I believe in you. It's an important one. Ik achahin. Because the other thing is just holding each other up, having nice things to say about each other. It's so important. We could learn how to do the mean stuff at some point. But I think just really holding each other up is an important cultural value. Another question that came through is, what is the E? This doesn't mean anything. It exists so that we can put a suffix onto a possessive pronoun, because you can't say my, to me, and you say ach eat or ach in. You're going to hear those things in a bunch of different verbs. Like you might hear someone say ach in Kalneek, tell me, tell it to me. So that e part just exists only so you could put a suffix, because you cannot put a suffix directly on a pronoun. So you can't say ach de or ach dach. It's got to be ach ide, ach idach. Okay. So we'll do both of these. So these run right into each other. And this K is just attaching, it's sort of like linked to this verb to say what the thing is that you're believing in. So everybody say shtuk, shtuk, achtehin,
Achtehin.
achtehin,
Achtehin.
shtuk achtehin,
Shituk. Achtehin.
shtuk achtehin.
Shituk. Achtehin.
And just make sure we're not putting some kind of vowel here. We're not saying shituk or shatuk. Shtuk.
Achtehin.
So Hawaiian has it's a very vowel driven language, I think. Like when I was learning Hawaiian, I was like, whoa, you guys do all kinds of wild stuff with the vowels, and you just run into each other. And they said, yeah, we don't have very many consonants. And I said, well, if you want to borrow some. And so Tlingit is kind of always ready to kick the vowels out. It's like, we don't need no vowel. We just go shta, and we just go shtu, and we just, so you'll have strings of consonants, sometimes 3 or 4 in a row. So shtuk. Okay, so now to believe in someone, ik
Eek.
Eik achahin. Achahin.
Acha.
Okay. And this one is excited and like it really means like it happened quickly to me. So you're kind of frenetic energy, I think. So this one means this is an adverb. It means fast. In certain situations, it could mean hurtful. So it's like if you say like they said it really fast, that's usually saying they said it in a hurtful way. But there's a lot of times, I think there might be two of them. I don't know when I think about them a lot. But in this case, it means fast. So this first word is talk. Try it out. Talk,
Cock.
talk,
Clock.
khatwune,
Hatwune.
khatwune.
Hatwune.
And this on its own, so this khat is an object pronoun. So this is where the verb happens to khat. There's a lot of people as they're learning Tlingit, they get ach and chat mixed up a lot. You'll just hear that. You'll say like, you ach do a sock, and people will say that. It should be, you chat do a
How do
sock.
I change my name? Because I really want to.
Who is that? What's going on?
Or they'll say,
But how do I change my name? Damn it.
we can hear you talking about your name. Okay. Or people will say chat tuwu when they ach tuwu. And so it's just something to keep in mind. Chatwune on its own means it happened to me. So then you say, Tlak chatwune. It happened quickly to me. And you're just kind of like a little bit blown away, I guess. Tlak chatwune. Tlak chatwune.
Hatwune.
Okay. Okay, ask questions if you got them. We're going to keep going. So this one is really interesting to me because, and there's a number of different things in Tlingit where like it does this thing a lot where it's like you add up a whole bunch of little things to make meaning. But then some things when you put them in just put them next to each other, you're like, okay, now that means something totally different. And this is the case. So klech puts a verb into the negative, right? Or just not always a verb, but just says not, right? Not here. Klech yatu, they're not here. Klech achji, not in my possession. So it turns something negative, whatever the thing is. And for here, you'll see it does this quite a bit. It reaches across all these different words and it turns the verb negative. So the positive form of this verb is yati, to be. Wasa yati, yechat yati, ye'awa achtuwu yati. So it's for something to be. So yati is what Hamlet said. And then he said, kesh ute. So there's your to be and not to be. And so kesh ute would mean to not be on its own. Usually there would be something in there, like kesh ye uti or something. So that's sort of like the framework. And then inside it, wasa is usually framing a how question. Wasa itu asak? How do people call you? Wasa iati? How are you? Wasa atbune? Well, that's what happened, but it could also be how did that happen? So in this case, and then you have khat uti. So it's basically the literal word by word, not how, name, me, be, negative form, right? So it's sort of saying that's not how I'm being. But as far as meaning, it means I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm not hurt. So it also depends on context. If someone asks you right out the bat, wasa'iyati, I'm okay. I'm fine. It's a little bit of a non-answer sometimes. Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. But if the context was, I jumped up onto a log and it's been raining for 30 out of the last 31 days, and that's really it's really slippery on that log, and I slip and fall off to the other side. And I might just yell this out to let everybody know I didn't get hurt. Then everybody knows that. In addition, you could, if you took the chat out of there, we'll kind of wrap it up with this phrase. The heen is not the water or river. It has to do with belief. It is a different word. There is a heen verb root, though, to be like to water something down or to mix it in water. Good question. So we're going to end with these two. And they're kind of complicated concepts. This is the ultimate sort of forgiveness phrase sometimes. Like someone could say something, somebody said something very hurtful to me. Like it was one of the most hurtful things anybody has probably ever done to me given the situation. A relative of mine died, and I felt bad because he was my little brother, and I raised him and I never gave him a Tlingit name. So we gave him a Tlingit name. And we ran it through the clan, and we said, this is not what you usually do. But he was young and he got shot, and I was really sad. And somebody made fun of me in public for it. They didn't mention me by name, but the timing was certainly there. And I was so angry. I could not believe that someone would hurt someone when they're going through something like that. I understand there's a lot of complexity to culture, to the way we do things, but I also think social media is a public space. And if you're going to do something there, everybody can see it, and it's not much different than shouting it out in front of the people. So I was very mad, but I was also just trying to not channel my grief towards that person and turn it into something, violent words or actions, because that's pretty high level stuff. And a bunch of time went by, and I saw that person, and they cried and they apologized, and it was very sincere. And so I said, Keshwasa oti. For Tlingit, that means it's all done. And if the context is right, that doesn't mean like, there are certain situations where I've seen people too stand up and do things, and they asked, was that apology acceptable? And the people said no. And then later they said, well, they apologized. You can't talk about it now. And I was like, no, because they didn't, both sides, as long as both sides are accepting of it, a lot of things can be overcome with this phrase, which means it's okay. It's okay. And then this also works really well for later, you'll learn, for more complicated phrases. Is it okay that I sit here? Is it okay that I come visit you? Is it okay that I eat your pancake, or whatever the thing is, right? So this could be the first thing, then you'd have a linked verb to it, which we'll get to later. But let's end with these. So the first one, we're going to say just the whole thing. Kleshwasachat ute.
Klahwasa
Chat
ute.
ute.
Kleshwasachat ute.
Klechwasa hat
Klahwasa
ute.
ute.
Kleshwasa ute.
Klechwasa ute.
Ute.
Kleshwasa ute.
Klahwasa ute.
Ute.
So this chat is always low tone, and that's how we know it's an object pronoun. There's another version like yadu chat aya. That one's always high, and it's what we call an independent pronoun. They sound almost identical, but they are different. I saw that question in the chat, and so just keep those things in mind. Words are powerful. They could do a lot, and including, like when we do this emotion stuff, it's always fun because we talk about like feelings. We also talk about communicating with each other, dealing with things, forgiving each other. Like my uncle Kadeshan, Paul Wilson, when he was older, he used to tell me all the time, he says, I'm so thankful people do things that give me opportunities to practice forgiveness. And I thought that was such a wonderful thing. He was very elderly, and he would talk about this stuff a lot. Like for drives. watch the tooch, the black ducks that are on the water, and then he would think a lot about where the salmon are based on what the ducks were telling him. So, Gurchi Shuhan, Yakaya Yuxatini, Achtu Yake Wuchin Has Haus, Achtu Yake Wuchin Hasati. I'm thankful that we're together. Gurchish. Yewushkachtustin. We'll see you.
Nasty.
Nasties.
Sheesh.